See that piece of green out there? Keep your eye on that, because that's where this ball's going. Bang. Straight down the middle, home run. Ali and Frazier, if I stand up there now, you'll kill me.
They owned it, didn't they? So imagine if you had a superpower where you could make people feel amazing, full of belief, full of confidence, feeling like they're walking on water, ready to win, ready to succeed. Well, today we've got Frank Dick, and he's the man that can do exactly that. Frank's one of the greats. I'm very grateful to have Frank in my life. He's mentored and coached me for over 10 years. And I mean, he's coached some of the greats. Here's a few: Alex Ferguson, Boris Becker, Daley Thompson. The list goes on. There's just too many. He's an expert in finding positive emotion, telling stories, and helping you win and succeed. Enjoy every single minute. Let's do this. Frank Dick, first question. Why is storytelling so important in business and life?
Well, first of all, storytelling gets into your emotions, right? It's not. I've often said to people, you've got to do two things in life if you're trying to get people to move with you. You've got to be able to teach and you've got to be able to sell. Teaching is the understanding part. That's to your head. But you sell to the heart. And once you've lifted the lid of emotions in a story, people get engaged with it, they remember the story, and make sure you put in your punchline for what it all means. So let me give you an example. One of the things I feel very strongly about at the moment is that people have got to learn to narrow their focus. There's too much out there. I mean, I ask you to improve your performance. What does that mean at the end of this?
It's really wide.
Yeah, it's just
really
far too wide. Can we narrow it down? 2 or 3 things, and maybe we can talk about trademarks at some point in all of this. You give people something tight to focus on, and they work down that line. So what is narrowing your focus? Well, here's a story for you. Babe Ruth, right? He's in his final season. He's a bit overweight. He's not been making the runs. The performances are going down. And he goes to Wrigley Field, Chicago, and he goes to the mat to bat. And the crowd are heckling him. One guy shouting at him, and he turns around at one point and says, "Hey, see that piece of green out there? Keep your eye on that, because that's where this ball's going." And the pitcher pitched, bang, straight down the middle, home run. Afterwards, the press got a hold of him and say, "What were you thinking about there? Were you trying to show that guy up in the stand exactly what?" No, I wasn't thinking about that. "Were you thinking this is your last season and things are not going too well?" No, I wasn't thinking that. "Well, what were you thinking about?" "I was just thinking about hitting the ball." Narrow your focus. Forget what the hassle is round about you. What is it you're supposed to be doing? Ali and Frazier, they're in the Rumble in the Jungle, I think it was. In these days, it was 15 rounds, I think it was, and it gets to the end of the 14th. They've been really knocking spots off each other. You know, they're not young boys anymore, and they were hardly standing up. Go back to the corner at the end of the 14th round, and Ali looks up at his Angela Dundee's trainer and says, "I've had it. If I go up, stand up there now, you'll kill me. Throw the towel in now." Now, I can only think that Angela Dundee's a brave kind of guy, because he gave him a slight slap and he said, and he told him, you know, something like, "Don't be silly. You've got to get up there and fight." At the end of the break, the bell goes, stool comes out, Angela Dundee gets out of his chair, Muhammad Ali stands up, and Joe Fraser's corner through the towel in. So sometimes it's just going the distance to narrow the focus. Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I love those 2 stories. Let's go with the last one first. You get so consumed with yourself, like in this competition of boxing, the other person was in pain. The other person had it. And all you can think of is the own pain that you're in.
And you're not going to win if you're not going to stand up and fight. Stand up and fight. So really simple little messages. If you can put them into a story, people visualize that straight away, right? They're engaged with the story. And that's why it's important. And I honestly think that sometimes we give lectures and so on, but actually within these lectures, within presentations, within a podcast like this, there'll be a couple of little bits that come out as a story that people will remember forever. That's it.
Yeah, like that hitting the ball story. It's really sort of narrowed it down to the basics, hasn't it? It's eliminating distractions. The crowd saying that, I'm angry about him saying that. No, I'm not focused on the piece of grass. I'm focused on hitting the ball. It's focused on the basics.
Yep. And sometimes you can go, let's take it a bit further about the basics. Apologies for being a little technical now. I'm going to move into track and field athletics, and in particular 400 metres. Now, Wade van Niekerk had come back from Beijing the year before the Rio Olympics, and he'd had the fourth fastest time in history over the distance. So he comes home, and I have a meeting, because I was the performance director with South Africa at this point. Have a meeting with Wade and his coach, Anne Sabota. She's a beautiful woman. If you met her, you'd think you'd met Miss Marple. It's a lovely lady, but like steel. Anyway, they were sat down and said, well, what are we going to do next? What's going to happen next year? What do we have to do? Win the gold medal. What does that look like? World record. I said, I'm not sure about that, Wade. See, I reckon the opposition are thinking that too. They've seen how fast you are now, and they know it's only going to be a world record that's going to do it. So I don't think that's what we should do. I think we should do something that's impossible. He said, like what? I said, 43 seconds. And we all laughed. And I said, but listen, Wade, 43, we know there's a 2-second differential between your first two and your second two. All you've got to do is run the first 200 metres in 20.5, the second one 22.5, and hey, we've got 43 seconds. So we still laughed about it. But nothing more was said. But it was into his head and it was into Ance's head, and off they went. This was October. Next April, he comes out and he runs 100 metres. Very seldom ran 100 metres, and he became the first man in history to run inside 10 for 100, inside 20 for 200, inside 44 for 400. First man in history to do it. He then managed to qualify. He did his qualifying time, but every race he was in was not a 400 metres, it was a 200 metres. In fact, he won the All-African Championships. He won in something like 20.43 or something like that, even though people were breathing down the back of his neck. Now, he's a 19.86 200 metres guy from the previous year. What's the opposition thinking? They're thinking, he's lost it. He's not running. He can't run the twos anymore. But what was he doing? He was just practicing the basic part of this race. He had to get through 200 metres in a controlled 20.5. Now, the lucky bit, if there was a lucky bit in the whole year, was the Olympic final. He gets lane 8. And you and I know, a lot of people think, dreadful, people can spot you. But what better lane to have if you're trying to run a controlled time? Right? First 100 metres, 10.8. Second 100 metres, 9.7. Goes through 200 metres then in 20.5. 10.7 on the top bend, and he comes home in just under 12. Okay, it was 43.03. It was a world record, and it was touching the impossible. And all that started with one basic, narrow your focus. What do you have to be? Fast. A lot of 400 metres got people emphasise the speed endurance aspect because it's a serious, painful endurance event at the end of the day. But there's no point of thinking about that unless you've got the basic unit right. It's like in business. If you don't get your basic unit at highest quality, don't think about going for quantity. Get the basic bit right, because that's what you build on. Again, narrow your focus.
Yeah, well, yeah, just love the story there. I mean, they owned it, didn't they? So you planted the idea with them and you discussed the idea. Whoa. And then what you said in that story, they went away with this in their heads now to work it out.
And you've got to own it. You said it so yourself.
You've got to own it.
People, I know we had this conversation a few times. I used to get this ownership bit really wrong. I used to say to people, look, you've got to give ownership to your staff. And then a friend of mine, Chris Moore, got a hold of me and he said, ownership is not for you to give, Frank. It's for people to take. And so that's why I emphasize that now. We create processes as leaders and so on for people to take ownership.
I do love that word, take. And I've learned a lot from listening to interviews of athletes that have won gold medals, Olympics, and serious achievements anyway. And it comes out a lot with confidence, that does. It's really important that I take confidence from that win. So again, ownership is something that you take. I think confidence is you take it from something that's happened and put it in and build yourself up.
Yeah, I think confidence. A lot of the work you're doing in your podcasts emphasizes the quality of leadership and so on. And I honestly believe that everybody's born with leadership skills. We're all born with them, but not everybody chooses to develop and use them.
What I call leadership skills.
Well, first of all, you've got to have a sense of vision. Right? You have to be very clear in where you're going, and I think the real quality leaders can imagine what excellence is going to be like in the future. They don't focus on what excellence is like now and just to be a little bit better than that next year. They try to get a picture, as I think it was Duhe, the Italian general, who said, "Victory smiles on those who anticipate the changing character of war, not those who wait for it to happen and then try to adapt later."
So anticipation is also...
Absolutely. And that's part of your vision, to be creative. Everybody talks about thinking outside the box and so on. I get that, and if we're not careful, we can just get wrapped up in it as if it's a cliche. But you have to do it. You really got to think beyond the edge of things, and by beyond the edge, I mean a lot of people love to be comfortable. Of course, we love to be comfortable and feel we're in control. But I love Mario Andretti's story about that line, and that was when he said, "If you feel in control, if you feel totally in control, you're not going fast enough." And I think that bit of
so on the edge,
stepping beyond the line, and therefore, as they say,
is that scary?
It's the courage to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and of course it's scary. But that, I mean, I think some people live on the edge of being scared. They love it. It's what I used to coach a lad called Dalton Grant. Dalton's a fantastic kid. I mean, what is he? He's 1 meter 86 tall, 87 tall, but his best high jump is 2 meters 37. So it's well above his height. Right?
Way above.
And he could. I mean, he almost gave me heart attacks at times. He'd go out there. Maybe he jumped. His best jump for the season might be 227. So he goes into a major competition, and he doesn't start till 2 meters 31. He doesn't start till then. And you're thinking, well, he just loved to be scared. It was his key piece of motivation, and I think there's a piece of that in a lot of people that they don't look for the easy way, you know, or. I think I'm pretty sure he was talking about this when Robert Frost said, "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that's made all the difference." Don't go with the crowd and what everybody else thinks the right way to go. Why didn't you give yourself right?
You see that? Let's just use that almost metaphorical picture that we've got there. We've got two roads. Because you have to create this in your mind's eye, don't you? Yourself. It's like if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm self-reflecting now, I've got two choices. You got to make them up, haven't you? I can carry on doing as I'm doing, or I can do this. You know, make the choice. I hear this phrase, "make good choices." You know, which is a challenge for us all. You, me, everybody else.
Well, and the other bit about that is make the choices good. Right. Turn them to your advantage. Whatever happens out there, and the world says that's a crap idea and all that sort of stuff, you make it the right choice.
Whatever happens out there, you said, we got lane 8. And you instantly turned that to optimism.
Yep.
Well, that is a perfect place to be.
Of course it is. It is a perfect place to be. Just remember why you're there. Right? You're not there to run somebody else's race in life. Ever. You're there to run your own.
But when you look at it through those lens, that is such a powerful viewpoint that creates emotion that it just drowns out any pessimism about being in lane 8 at all, doesn't it?
Well, just to take in your thought line on this one, let's jump somewhere else into space, right? Chris Hadfield's book, The Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth.
I've not read it.
Well, it's worth a read for this reason. The astronaut's training program is designed to assume that it's not going to work, right? Now, that's kind of scary. You're going to leave the Earth, and you're going to arrive at a space station, but you expect things not to be working for you when you get there. And it's kind of a derivative of our old ideas. Don't expect life to happen. Make it happen. Make it happen for you. And the other derivative of that is just what you've said, is this optimism. Turn it to your advantage. And I love that idea of when you go into anything in life, it's like walking into your arena, right? Is there some kind of predictability out there? Of course there's not. Is there an iota of certainty when you walk into the arena? Of course there's not. There's only uncertainty. But you know it's your job, and you're good at it, to turn uncertainty to your advantage. So I think all of these little ideas are crystallized around your point.
Yeah, you see, walk out to your arena. Everybody's got an arena. You don't have to be a superstar. You don't have to be a movie star. You don't have to be a rock star. You don't have to be a famous athlete. Everyone's got an arena. What's your arena? You know, that's what I wrote down there. What's my arena? Walk out there.
Okay, well, let's come back to something that you and I do every day. We coach.
Yeah.
And one of the nuts that I know we both crack very frequently is a coach has actually got two jobs when they work with someone. The first is to prepare them for their arena. In my case, it's a competitive sport or whatever. The second one is through that process to prepare them for life. And I think that, unfortunately, most coaches have got a very clear agenda, an itinerary for how they're going to deal with the arena, right, the technical aspects. But there's this other bit about preparing for life. We should be building into our coaching messages all the time. These are the values that you will live in your life. This is how you're going to cope with adversity, and so on and so on and so on. So coaching, I believe, must focus on these two areas. And the only way you can do it is to be sound at the technical aspect of what you do. I mean, don't ask me to coach a pole vaulter. I don't understand it. I can explain processes to her, but I can't coach her how to pole vault. So there's a technical side. Know that, and at that point, know what you know what you don't know, and know somebody who does, and bring them to the parties to compensate for you.
There's something there though for top coaches. They are aware of that, and they don't pretend to be something they're not, and they're not threatened. And in my opinion, even in the upper echelons of coaching, being threatened by other coaches exists, but not by the top, not by the very best. They bring the right brains to the table. I've done it with you many times. You need to spend a day with Frank.
Well,
Let's bring Frank in.
Thanks for that. Once you've got the technical bits in place, the bit you're going to be really hot on now is the people bit. Understanding people. And I know you have some great podcasts on here where people emphasize the importance of having strong people around them. I think it's really, really important. But once you've got them around you, the next big task is, do you know them, right? Do you really know who your people are? Because if you don't, you won't be able to communicate. You will not be able to communicate with them. And once you get down that road, I think the other thing, and I think I don't want to go through a lengthy list of leadership qualities, but one of the things that of course is knowing your people, and wrapped up in that is something I learned from a great sports psychologist, Corinne Reed, in Australia, when she used this expression, stress signatures. Now I'd never heard the expression before. What's a stress signature? But the moment she'd said it, of course we know what that is. Right? We know that for each of us, there's something that lifts you up, and there will be other things that can actually pull you down. Yeah. And the things that pull you down are, for the most part in my world, are the things that touch, because we already mentioned emotions, they begin to touch and threaten your emotions. And those people who cannot cope and manage that threat to their emotions, these are the people who begin to lose ground. And what we've got to do is be strong. It's not just important for me, if I'm working with you, it's not just important for me to know my stress signature, I'd like to know yours. Because I'll be able to spot when your head drops that little bit and step in. And I know you so well, I'll know the kind of things that have been upsetting you right now. And pull you back on track so that you're in control of your emotions. The emotional bit, I think, I don't want to labour this point, but the emotional bit is something that I really think we don't pay an awful lot of attention to. For example, when you're training somebody, you train them physically, you train them mentally, but you also train them emotionally to handle what's going on out there. At the other side of that, when people are exhausted and under pressure and so on, do you know how to get them back on their feet physically? Most of us do. Mentally, good night's sleep. Emotionally? How many of us are really, really understand, and I'm not pretending I do, really understand how emotional fatigue or emotional investment can lead to serious emotional fatigue and actually knock the other two out of the park, physical and mental. It pulls you right down.
Well, I think awareness. You look at emotional intelligence as a concept, as it's a skill. Yeah, it's things that people can develop. Some people are quite intuitively good at that. Other people have to develop it. But one of the core components of emotional intelligence is awareness.
Yes.
Second part is regulation, how you manage your emotions and how you can see other people managing theirs or help other people manage theirs. So that's I think your top coaches do check in. Yeah. How are you feeling right now? What's going on?
And the coaches themselves have to check in.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, let's talk that. Because they can neglect themselves, yeah? It's common.
Yeah. We're so busy.
Who helps the person who helps everybody else?
You got to find somebody to help you. You really got to find, I don't know whether you want to call them a mentor or a coach or whatever. You need somebody.
Well, I found you a long time ago, and you're one of them people for me.
Well, appreciate that. And oddly enough, you are such a calm person under pressure. I feed off that when I watch you in action. So maybe one of the interesting things about...
Let's talk about calmness and the impact on performance. You look at Lionel Messi. Mm-hmm. I mean, that that ultimate calmness when you're executing to perfection anything that's technical or your skills. I mean, but this happens in business as well. Mm-hmm. And, people listening to this, they want to develop themselves. I mean, we're talking calmness here. Everybody can develop that. And is it one of the things that you learn last, calmness? Or, because the sooner you get it, the better it is, yeah? I mean, Lionel Messi, young age, composed under that amount of pressure, being calm when it matters most. How do you develop it?
For Lionel Messi, of course, all he's looking for is a moment. In the 90 minutes of the game, he's only looking for the moment. Can you dismiss the frustrations and know that your moment is going to come?
So now we're back to anticipation, what you were saying earlier on, and being ready. Yeah. I'm ready for it. Yeah. Give me a moment. So maybe I've not heard that before actually. Whilst I'm speaking about calmness, but being ready for your moment, anticipating your moment. Are you ready now? If it happens, because what happens when you're not ready, it can cause momentarily for you to be a stress response.
That's why, and I know this will sound really extreme, but you've got to respect every moment you've got when you're working in your arena. You've got to respect every moment. You don't know which one of these is going to be the turning point. You might know afterwards, but you don't know in advance. But as you say, you've got to be ready for it, right? And you can't be in life, it's like being a slip fielder or an opening bat. You can't be 100% focused 100% of the time. You've got to take yourself down and take yourself up again. And there are skills that go with that. If you ask some of the cricket guys, there are skills that people learn, how they breathe, what they focus on, and so on. But let me give you an example. I was working with Boris Becker, and I thought I was being really clever one day when I said, I think it's good that you guys you're so professional when when you're out there, you take time to make sure that the strings are realigned on your racket. And he said, no, Frank, that's not why we do that. I said, well, what are you doing? He said, we're focusing on a point. We want to get rid of what's just happened and focus on the point, bring us into the now, and then deal with the next one. And I think a lot of us need something like that. I think the psychologists think they call it grounding. Is that right? But there are other simple little...
It's a little simple routine, isn't it?
There are other techniques that all of us could do at any point in the day when we feel under a bit of pressure. And I'll tell you a story about this. The Vancouver Olympic Games, Canada had just come from a very bad previous Winter Olympics, and it's now a home Winter Olympics. And you know what Canada's like. Winter Olympics is what they live for: ice hockey, the snow and stuff. Yeah. And so they're really looking forward to it. And you could say, well, home advantage, what a great thing, bringing it home. But that brings its pressures if you're not careful. The pressure onto you, that's going. And they were very worried because a lot of the athletes were having anxiety attacks. And so they started to spend an awful lot of money, biofeedback, all sorts of stuff, on how you could control this and learn to control it. But at the end of the day, it was take 6 deep breaths. Slow, deep breaths. And if you watch what's happening in rugby at the moment, for example, when the French team have a break and they're standing in a little circle, watch what they do. A couple of times over, just to get them back down. And it's so simple. It's like the story about the other story about the astronauts when they were looking for a way to stop the ink running out of the ballpoint pens and stuff, right? And they spent thousands and thousands of pounds on it, but the Russians used pencils. You know, don't let's look all over the place for something that's actually quite simple, and maybe again this comes back to narrowing the focus.
Look, I like a couple of things that you've said in there. One in particular is space to think and breathe.
That's it.
I've got a 7-year-old little boy. You know, he's got to go and take a penalty on Sunday for his football. You know, the same. His mentor would say the same as, I don't know, Richard Branson going into his big meeting with all of his boards to take the next spaceship into outer space or build the intergalactic space station, whatever he's doing. Just take your time. Just go when you're ready.
And coming back to the idea of, I think you're almost describing it as stepping back. I think tackling problems and big issues in life are a bit like appreciating and understanding a painting. You know,
go on.
If you get really close to it, to the detail, without seeing the picture, you'll get. It's a meaningless ploy. Stand back. See the whole picture and see the bits that are out of place, in my simple mind.
That's what they do in sport. I mean, in sports coaching, they've got a principle that, I mean, I've been through all of the qualification. You've done the same. I mean, this is taking you back probably 4 or 5 decades. Whole coaching. Teach the whole thing so you get this, break it down into parts and then put the whole thing back together again.
You can see, and I can't remember if I told you the story before about this Bondarchuk, who's a world record holder in hammer, Olympic champion, and he coached world record holders and Olympic champions. He came to Edinburgh to do a session at a coaches conference, and he'd lectured on hammer, and we were going to do a practical session. Went down to Meadowbank Sports Centre. The crowd, it was a snowy day. The crowd, the audience had sort of packed themselves around the circle, and a guy called Chris Black, he'd swept the circle clean. But Bondarchuk was standing about 30 metres away. And as through Ludmilla, his interpreter, I said, well, please ask Anatoly to come up. I'll get rid of these people, make them move to the other side of the circle. She said, no, through him, translated for him, no, if you get too close, you can't see anything. When you step back, you will see where the technique is fractured. And the moment you do that, in my world, you start at the feet and work up.
You see, I like the the little analogies and stories that we're putting on that, because it's not one or the other, it's both, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, you've got to get into depth and detail.
Yep.
But you've got to see the whole thing as well.
Absolutely. I don't want people to think I'm contradicting myself with narrow the focus.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what it's like. It's having the ability, and I think great leaders, not just coaches, leaders have got to be really good at this. You've got to be able to see the game, as it were, as if you're standing in the stands and you see the whole thing. But you've got to understand the game as if you're on the field, right? So you've got to have something like a tunnel vision and a funnel vision, right? You start off with the funnel vision up at the top, and then you go tunnel vision when you go to the detail.
It's got a nice ring to it, that. Tunnel and funnel vision. All right, let's go trademarks. We said this earlier on. Let's go trademarks. Where do we start?
Okay, the idea of trademarks I heard for the first time from Neil Craig, who is a performance director across in Australia. He was working with Eddie Jones with the England rugby team. And we had this idea. Remember what I said, if I ask you to improve your performance, what does that mean, Frankie? Okay, tell me something. What to you is your trademark? What do you bring to your business that nobody else can? 3 things maximum, right? And it could be a technical thing, carrying rugby or whatever. It could be a communications thing. Yeah. I'm a good listener. I don't get what it is. Can you define them for me? Because this is your strengths. Bearing in mind, a little sidebar here, bearing in mind that as a coach, I believe your first priority is to coach somebody's strengths. That's number one.
Let's do it to the listeners right now. I mean, everybody consider what's your trademark? What are your 2 or 3 things that...
please just take a moment. Just think about it. What are your trademarks? Write them down, But I want you to be sure these are your strengths. This is what you are going to bring to your team. Then, every week, I'd like us to take a bit of time to score ourselves out of 7. Don't ask me why 7 is quite arbitrary, but I love 7. 7 maximum, world class. 1, you're just getting into the game. I tried this with a friend of mine, Ronnie Irani, who works very closely with Steve Smith, who runs Bishop Stortford Soccer Club. They were in the Isthmian League, right, which is part-time footballers. Okay, it's not a premiership, down there, partly amateur, partly pro. And Ronnie said to me, last year, they got to the playoffs, but they didn't qualify, having been at the top for a few weeks. He said, what do you think we should do with them, Frankie? And so there was 10 weeks to go. And I said, and I explained the story to them. So he took that back to them, and it always became a cult. Like, guys would come up after training or whatever and say, oh, I gave that a serious 6. And one of the other players said, no, you're lucky if that was a 3, mate. And they would have these discussions. So people got involved in each other's trademarks, which was good. You owned your own, but you're also looking around at other people's, because they wrote them up. Right? They had this discussion every week. 10 games out of 10 promoted. So I know
from playing to your strengths, from believing in it, from assessing it, from sharing it.
Yeah. And then from a coaching point of view, again, just to come back to that sidebar, I believe your first priority as a coach is to coach these trademarks, to coach people's strengths. The only time you should really look at weaknesses is, first of all, if the weakness is interfering with that strength, or secondly, pretty importantly, if it's interfering with the strengths of other people in the team.
Yeah, amazing stuff, isn't it? Great. I've watched you do that with a group of people. I've watched you, got them to self-reflect. Come on then, what's your trademark? What's your score? How are you going to get 1 point more? Grade it every week. PBs, tell us the Mr. Dick story.
Oh, well, I'd gone to see the Scottish Youths and Junior Championships at Scotstoun in Glasgow. And a TV crew were there, and out of nowhere somebody came and said, Frank, would you like to come and do a quick few minutes to talk about... Yeah, so sure. Came across, and out of nowhere, the guy asked me a question, what's winning? And I was totally unprepared for it, so I had to make up this story on the spur of the moment. So I said, 100 years ago when I was the Scottish national coach, I used to go around the tracks of Scotland, trying to work with coaches to help them be better at their jobs. And out of nowhere, a little voice came in. Mr. Dick! Mr. Dick! Yes? Will you coach me? Well, not at the moment because I'm coaching these people across here. Will you coach me later? Well, yes, fine. When's that? Look, go and sit in the stand, keep yourself warm. When I'm finished coaching these people, I'll come and work with you. Promise? Yes. See you. Fine. So after I finish working with the coaches, I work with her. She's 8 years of age and she wants to run 100 meters. Right? So I work with her for a few weeks. And I tell her, she was 10 years of age. She wants to run 100 meters. And I work with her. She goes to her first race. She lines up with another 7 kids. On your marks. Sit. Runs down the track. Hurls herself at the line. 8th out of 8 in 18 seconds. She came running back to me and said, Mr. Dick, I was last. And I said, no, you weren't last. Yes, I was, you said. No, you weren't last. You were 18 seconds. What do you mean? Well, I had you down for 20 seconds and you've smashed the 20-second barrier. Do you know what this means? No. It means it's your lifetime best performance. Really? Yes. It's your own personal world record. Really? Yes. In a few weeks' time, she's got another race to run. What does she think winning is now? Right? She's got to be 18 seconds. She'll run 17.9. She'll grab a flag and run around the track, right? Because that's what winning is in life. Winning is being better today than you were yesterday, every day. Right? At something, right? That's what winning is. She goes for the. She runs in this race. She finishes 7th. She runs 17.9 seconds, and she keeps doing that time after time as she progresses. And if you do that, one day you'll be a one and only, right? And what is being a one and only? Being a one and only is simply being the best person that you can be in life. Don't compare yourself to other people, right? Because you're not them. We also have heroes in life, but the idea is not to imitate heroes. The idea is for us to be inspired what they're doing so that we grow in our own way. Right? The bottom line again is winning's being better today than you were yesterday, every day.
It was such a beautiful story, isn't it? And the opportunities, outside of sport, because it's classically associated with sport as a PB. I've implemented this in businesses through our coaches with thousands of businesses across the UK. You've got your own benchmarks. You can do it on sales, you can do it on marketing, you can do it on people watching your podcasts. The opportunities to assess yourself and benchmark yourself with your own performance are just far and wide for everyone.
And I think that said, I think we've each got to have our own inbuilt personal review or personal debriefing on things. You'll have your own. I mean, the one that I work on all the time is 4 R's. The first R is reason. Why am I doing this? What's the purpose of what we're doing today? Second R is reality. Who's involved? What's to be done and how are they going to do it? The third R is reflection or review. What did I learn from this experience? And the fourth one is response. What are you going to do about it? What can you do better or differently? And to be quite honest, James, an awful lot of people get to the learning part and they'll walk away saying, this is what I learned today, but the job's only half done at this point. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with what you've learned?
I think that's, especially on the reflection piece, I mean, just giving yourself time to think, maybe even make notes, take it out of your head, round. I like that phrase, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. When I start writing it down, I'm really starting to write it into existence. But then when I share it with you later on, my chance of taking action on it and persisting against it is much, much higher.
And I think with the review, and in the military, they talk about hot and cold debriefs, right? And I certainly have brought that into working with athletes and so on and business. The hot debrief is just after you've finished the podcast or the meeting, yeah, or the sales pitch or whatever, or you've just come off the field, the heart's pounding like this, sweats on the forehead, you're out of breath, and I want to know how you feel. A lot of people will criticize me for this and say, oh, they're too emotionally involved in things. But that's what I want. I want to know the reality of this situation because I can probably coach that. I want to know how they were feeling out there. I don't want some cosmetic sort of version that somebody's worked out. What will Frank like me to say here? So you get the hot debrief in. Tell you who's good at, well, world record holders in this, the red arrows. When they land from even a practice session, they're already debriefing when they're in the planes before they go to park them. If that's what you do with airplanes, they're still talking. Number one, I did this. I noticed number 5 did X. Number 3 would chip in and say, yeah, I had the same problem last time we did this, and this is what I did. So they're already debriefing before they get out of the planes. Then later, when you got all the metrics and got all then you do your call debrief. Yeah. But there's lessons to be learned in both.
Yes, there is. I love that. You can build that into your planning, actually.
I hope so.
You come out of a sales meeting, you give yourself 5 minutes, and do a debrief or phone someone up and talk them through it.
Well, let's come back to the planning bit, because I see all these bits as a continuum of learning. Okay, not everybody loves me saying this, but I say what happens in the field is all down to your preparation. No, it's not. It's what happens. No. If it's gone wrong in the field, the preparation wasn't right. Let's get that right. Now, because preparation is so important, then
it's irrefutable what you've said there. I've just worked it all out.
Because preparation is so important, I believe you've got to be really forensic in testing it. You've really got to push back at it. Ask yourself questions about what could go wrong. For example, the classics on this are what they call red teaming, imagining what the other opposition might do to us with the plan that we've got. And you could, if you're in a pitch, people will be sort of pushing questions back at you. But the other one is called pre-mortems. Now, the pre-mortem idea came out of the US SEALs when they were going for bin Laden. And what they did, the first time, as far as I'm aware, it was ever used, they imagined things that could go seriously wrong, not what the opposition are doing, things that could go seriously wrong in going in for it. And you'll remember one thing that went wrong, the helicopter went down. That had been one of the things and so when it did, nobody was fazed because we already knew this, we knew what to do. And I honestly think, make sure that we get these debriefings right and we do something with them, not just learning, do something with them. But in advance, make sure you test your preparation. The worst thing to do is to sit around a table and you've come with a plan and somebody pushes back at you, because we should all do that with each other. Push back a little bit. Are you sure about that? Why are we doing that? If you don't have an answer to that, then we're all in a bit of trouble. We've got to have really thought the thing through.
It's really cool, Frank. I've got some quick questions for you here. What's your favourite book that you've ever read?
Well, probably doesn't sound very profound, but one of the first books that really changed me was The Prophet by Khalil Gibran.
Why?
Well, there's one of the lines it's a poem, and there's one of the lines in it that I found very precious on a number of levels. The prophet's leaving the land, and the people of the land are asking him questions because they know they're never going to see him again. And one of the questions, what's love, what's joy, what's sorrow, what's death? And one of the questions was, what of parents and their children? And I'll paraphrase it. He said, the parent is to the bow as the child is to the arrow. It's our job as parents and as coaches to give people power, give them direction, but we're supposed to let them go. And unfortunately, that's the most difficult thing in life to do. I'll give you a story about that, because I'm very good at giving advice, as you know, James, but not very good at accepting it myself. Our next door neighbour at one point, there was Barry and Linda Dicker, and they had a daughter, Zoe. And Zoe was going to study veterinary science up in Glasgow. We were living in London. And I came home one night and Linda asked me this question I've never been able to answer properly, because I get asked this question very often. you'll never guess what Linda next door said today. No, you got me there, darling. I said, well, you know they were taking Zoe up to university? I said, yeah. Well, Barry cried all the way home in the car. I said, well, what a big soft toy he's turned out to be. I thought he was a tough guy. Huh? Well, 2 years later, I'm stood in the car park at St Andrews University saying goodbye to my elder daughter, Erin, as she went into university. And there must have been a grain of sand that blew itself from the beach and lodged itself in my eye, but I felt distinctly uncomfortable. I said to Linda and Cara, my younger daughter, please sit in the car. I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to sit in the car. And I sat there and I thought, what's wrong with you? Is it that you haven't given her enough smarts to deal with the hurly-burly of university? You've spent so much time looking after everybody else's kids. And then it dawned on me. It wasn't that I hadn't prepared her. I hadn't prepared me. Because the job is to let go. And it's tough. We all know that as parents. And actually, quite a few coaches find that tough too.
Yeah, well, maybe we should do another session with you on how to let go. And all right, we've got some more questions for you. What's your favourite movie?
Pay It Forward.
What a principle that is, you know.
Kevin Spacey. The idea, the story's built around Ralph Waldo Emerson's lines. I can't remember what essay he was in, where he said, "Beware of holding too much goodness in your hands too long. You must pay it away, cent for cent, ounce for ounce, but for the most part, you can't do it completely." And what we're getting at is people give us things in life, your mum and dad to you, my mum and dad to me, our coaches, our friends, and so on. But the truth is you can never pay them back. So all you can do is what they did. You pay it forward. And that particular movie is about, think of three people. Yeah.
It's nice when it multiplies like that, isn't it? You know, the biggest gift in life is to give.
And I kind of linked that movie as if it was a trilogy with another two, Dead Poets Society and Good Will Hunting.
Robin Williams is in both, yeah?
Yeah, nice bits of...
And what's your favourite music?
Well, I love Whitney Houston. I love Celine Dion.
You know what? I've even seen you sing Whitney Houston.
Well, I saw Whitney Houston up at Wembley. She was across a long time ago. Love them both. But for doing work, the best thing I can do to myself is switch on. It sounds like straight off the counter stuff, but I've got an album that's Mozart's 100 Greatest Hits or something. It's called something like that. But Mozart is definitely the best music to do work to. Thinking work.
Thinking work. And if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Fly. I'd just like to fly. Yeah. And that kind of relates to
Superman or Iron Man.
Superman.
Superman all the way. Favorite holiday destination?
Well, for years we went to a place called Stangelwirt near Kitzbühel in Austria, which was fantastic.
Skiing or in the summer?
Well, it was skiing, but I don't do the sexy downhill stuff. I leave that to Linda and the girls. I do the cross country, nice flat stuff.
The endurance stuff.
Although Linda has accused me of road rage when I've been on flat skis.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. Are you an early bird or night owl?
Both.
Both?
But I have to say, if I've got a piece of work to do, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I get so much work done between then and 8 o'clock that you wouldn't do for the rest of the day.
If you could have one day in someone else's life, who would you choose?
Abraham Lincoln, I think.
Is there a particular day that's standing out?
Well, I just loved the fact that he could produce speeches. I don't know where the Gettysburg speech, which I thought was fantastic.
I love the fact that he just went straight there, Abraham Lincoln, because he produces speeches, and that's what you do. So it's relatable. Who have been the three biggest trusted advisors in your life that you've had?
The late Jeff Gowan, who was my coach at Loughborough.
What did you get from Jeff?
He really understood track and field, and he really understood the technical
Technicals.
side. Yeah. And there was also a guy called, at Loughborough called Baz Stamatakis, who was Greek, Stamatakis. And for his short, sharp bits of wisdom and for reading people. I mean, I'd absented myself from college in my very first term, and I arrived back late, and I went to apologise to him. I said, "Mr. Dick, I knew you'd be late.
What did you say?
I knew you would be late." So I didn't.
And the third person?
That's probably Bill Bauman in University of Oregon. I don't know if you know Bill, but the thing most people remember him for is that not as a track and field coach, but they'll remember him as working with Phil Knight and creating Nike.
It's pretty powerful, isn't it? That new movie, documentary on Nike is unbelievable.
Well, I tell you what, this is something a lot of people out there really should pay attention to. They had this very simple idea. He knew how to make a particular kind of shoe that was better for athletes running on roads. Phil Knight had said that could be a business. So they put together a little business plan, and they went around the houses of Eugene, getting $100 from each house to set up the business. And that started the whole thing.
Wow.
And
from investors.
Yeah. If you're going to dream big.
Yeah, if you're going to dream big. What do you think the first thing that people could do after listening to this podcast? What do you think the first thing could or should be?
Well, first of all, I'd like them to make sure that if they haven't done it already, let's check out the trademarks. And let's start to live these things.
And start to live these things. Nice, powerful. You know, my favorite bit today is how you just constantly told stories in between. I just enjoy being in your presence, Frank. What's been your favorite part today?
Sitting down, having a chat. I mean, it's not often you get a chance to talk freely about things that you really believe in life. And that in itself is a joy. It's great, and you and I both know we always enjoy having a conversation because even with you asking the questions, I end up trying to find out what's behind your question.
Yeah. It takes two to tango. It's a learning process for everybody.
And the other thing is there's a bit of teaching wrapped up in this, isn't there? And I love that Chinese philosophy to teach is to learn twice.
You see, he never stops. He never stops with these inspirational things. To teach is to learn twice. So look, on behalf of everybody listening to this podcast right now, thank you very much, Mr. Dick.
Thank you.
All right, there we go.